Well, I'm attorney Dan Marr from the Nashua, New Hampshire law firm of Hamlin and Kerrigan. I've been practicing in the state of New Hampshire for about 39 years and in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts about 28 years. And I'm going to be focusing in on today in New Hampshire of what happens when somebody does something intentionally against you, or you're in a business and one of your employees, unbeknownst to you, does something intentionally wrong to a customer or somebody else out, a third party, meaning somebody out in the public. So we're going to be talking about that, what's called intentional torts, and how that works in New Hampshire. So an intentional tort is a situation where somebody does something against somebody else with intent. It could be, we'll talk about fraud, we'll talk about assault, including sexual assault. We'll talk about other intentional acts where somebody's actually intending to do the bad act and they cause harm because of it. We're not talking about somebody's driving in a in their car and they're checking their texts and they hit somebody. That's negligence. They may have some criminal consequences for that, for them not paying attention to that, but generally it's not an intentional tort. They didn't intend to hit that person in the crosswalk. But here, if somebody was intending to got angry with somebody, and they decide to intentionally hit somebody in a car, or they punched the person, or they were a predator and they actually sexually assaulted a person, or they committed fraud. They said something that was an intentional lie to get money from somebody else. All of those are called intentional torts. I've had situations certainly with bookkeepers that have had other vlogs that I've talked about where they are embezzling, and that's an intentional tort. They're stealing money from you, and that's an intentional tort. But sometimes as a business person, you're in a situation where you hired this person and you didn't know that they were going to be doing something intentionally. You didn't tell them to defraud a customer, but they decided they wanted more commission, so they decided to defraud a customer. Or they decided to take a quicker route to a business place, and they were racing and they hit somebody, or they were maybe doing some side jobs, and we'll talk about the difference between that. So first off are your employee situations on these intentional torts. If they're trying to further your best interests, it's what's called in the scope of employment, and you can be liable for their actions. So say you have a salesperson, and that salesperson is committing fraud to a customer or a potential customer to get some business from that person. They lied to them, and they were doing it for business book to your company. You're going to be on the hook for that. It's called, the Latin term is called respondeat superior. It's let the masters be responsible for the servant. The servant, being your salesperson, is acting on your best interests. If that salesperson on the side, was doing a side hustle, they maybe were doing business on the side, and they weren't doing it within your business. Maybe they were taking material off your construction site, asphalt, and they were doing paving of driveways on their side. You might have a situation you want to look with your attorney as to when that's outside the scope of employment. It wasn't something that you had them do. You can also be in a situation for the employer that you're not liable for intentional torts if somebody went and it's called frolic and detour, where they're doing sales stuff, but they stopped off at a bar, they drank too much, and on the way back to the hotel, they hit somebody. In that situation, it could be argued that as a frolic and detour. They went out, they weren't doing something to further your best interest by going to the tavern and drinking too much and then going back to the hotel on the business trip. That was a frolic and detour, and you may not be responsible for that under respondeat superior. Now that all factors majorly in as to whether or not you have proper insurance for this. If you have proper insurance, the insurance company is going to be dealing with this, but sometimes you don't have the insurance for these situations. Certainly, and you also have some issues with if there's a fraud issue, there's generally not coverage for that, but general driving drunk and hitting somebody, that would be something that would be, they intentionally got drunk, but when they actually hit somebody, it was a negligence claim. So that's some of the issues that are out there. There's cases out there where there's a bouncer goes and sees an attractive woman in a nightclub, and he goes out to the parking lot and he assaults her in the parking lot. Would that be something that would be furthering the business interest? No. It's a good argument of saying that's outside the scope of employment. But if a bouncer went and got overly aggressive with a patron, they were telling them to leave and they wouldn't leave as quick as this person wanted to, so then they got into a fight with them, that would more likely be within the scope of employment. It would be something that you didn't condone, but still be within the scope of your employment. So all of those issues matter in regards to whether or not you're responsible. If you have an intentional tort as a victim, you want to talk to an attorney quickly about trying to get it seize assets. If you can go after the employer, you want to go after the employer. If you can go if the person that did the wrong acts, if you can get liens against bank accounts at the house. The house, unfortunately, is there's a $400,000 homestead exemption. We can talk about that, and I have talked about it in other vlogs. But there are some limits of what you can do in regards to that person. But you want to try locking up their assets as quick as possible because they probably don't have insurance for something they did intentionally. Generally, insurance does not provide for coverage for somebody's intentional acts. There's some exceptional insurance out there, but most people don't have that insurance that will provide for intentional acts. So if you're a victim of that, you want to talk to an attorney quickly to try to get liens on stuff. You know, if you were sexually assaulted by somebody, you were intentionally, somebody hit you, somebody defrauded you, you want to go after them quick and not rely on possible insurance because there may not be insurance. I'm attorney Dan Marr. I'm at 603-883-5501. I've been doing this for decades. Happy to help if the opportunity arises. You can also check out my weekly vlogs at nashvillelaw.com. That's nashvilllaw, one word.com. Click my bio, and then from my bio, you can go direct to the link of the YouTube channels. I've been doing weekly, all by a variety of topics, and you can decide on the topic that's of interest to you and click it. Thank you. Look forward to working with you. The opportunity arises. Thanks.